Hello, and welcome to Dissecting Philosophy with Dr McDonald. In this episode, we'll be reading and discussing the sections The Tree on the Mountainside and Of the Preachers of Death. We've also got a couple of great wee examples talking about the film Whiplash, and also a wee brief discussion about the song Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. That'll round off the episode in a nice wee upbeat way. So let's get cracking on. Of the Tree on the Mountainside. Zarathustra had noticed that a young man was avoiding him, and, as he was walking alone one evening through the mountains surrounding the town called the Pied Cow, behold, he found this young man leaning against a tree and gazing wearily into the valley. Zarathustra grasped the tree beside which the young man was sitting and spoke thus. If I wanted to shake this tree with my hands, I should be unable to do it. But the wind, which we cannot see, torments it and bends it where it wishes. It is invisible hands that torment and bend us the worst. At that, the young man stood up in confusion and said, I hear Zarathustra, and I was thinking of him. I hear Zarathustra, and I was just thinking of him. Zarathustra replied, Why are you alarmed on that account? Now it is with men, as with this tree. The more it wants to rise into the heights and the light, the more determinedly do its roots strive earthwards, downwards, into darkness, into the depths, into evil. Yes, into evil, cried the young man. How is it possible you can uncover my soul? Zarathustra smiled and said, There are many souls one will never uncover, unless one invents them first. Yes, into evil, cried the young man again. You have spoken the truth, Zarathustra. Since I wanted to rise into the heights, I have no longer trusted myself, and no one trusts me any more. How did this happen? I changed too quickly. My today refutes my yesterday. When I ascend, I often jump over steps, and no step forgives me that. So in this initial little section here, we have the return of the town called the Pied Cow coming in. And we also have this discussion about the tree on the mountainside, in which we have invisible forces, or as Nietzsche says here, the invisible hands that torment and bend us, which is referring to, of course, the worldly forces that, of course, are out with our control, that ultimately shape and influence how we think. So initially we think we are pretty much in control of our life, in control of our actions, but is ultimately here saying, well, it's the invisible forces, the things which we can't see, are ultimately the things that influence how we think and what we do in life. And of course that could be just a reflection upon the way in which social norms and cultural norms affect how we think about things. And on the other hand here, we have the young man arguing for creation and wanting to be creative and aspiring to the heights, basically. So what is he doing? He's climbing up this mountain, and the more he climbs, the more he finds himself alone. And so it's a reflection here upon the creative act, is that once we are creative individuals, what do we aspire for? The heights, of course. And what is that? An ideal goal or a transcendent foundation in philosophy terms, or a metaphysics, let's say, in which everyone's got to go towards. But the more that you head towards it, the more you're separated off from everybody else. The more that ultimately you have this goal and going towards it, the more ultimately you become asocial. And at the same time as well, we have the more you want to go up into the heights, the more the roots go down into the depths and the darkness, into evil. What exactly is that saying? That ultimately the goals and things that we're aspiring towards here, that we hold as ideals, will be highlighted, the worst part of us, let's say for power, fame, or greed purposes here. They'd be all things that people have to do horrible things in order to accomplish those goals in the first place. So continuing on, when I am aloft, I always find myself alone. No one speaks to me, the frost of solitude makes me tremble. What do I want in the heights? My contempt and my desire increase together. The higher I climb, the more do I despise him who climbs. What do I want in the heights? How ashamed I am of my climbing and stumbling. How I scorn my violent panting. How I hate the man who can fly. How weary I am in the heights. Here the young man fell silent, and Zarathustra contemplated the tree beside which they were standing, and spoke thus. This tree stands here alone on the mountainside. It has grown up high above man and animal, and if it wished to speak, it would find no one who understood it, so high has it grown. Now it waits and waits, yet what is it waiting for? It lives too near the seat of the clouds. Is it waiting perhaps for the first lightning? When Zarathustra said this, the young man cried with violent gestures, Yes, Zarathustra, you speak true. I desired my destruction when I wanted to ascend into the heights, and you are the lightning for which I have been waiting. Behold, what have I been since you appeared among us? It is envy of you which has destroyed me. Thus spoke the young man, and wept bitterly. But Zarathustra laid his arm about him and drew him along with him. And when they had been walking together for a while, Zarathustra began to speak thus. So let's stop for a second then. So in this little next section, we have sort of this critical moment of self-reflection where the young man has achieved his goals. He's ultimately at the height of whatever he was wanting to achieve. And he also, there's that resentment here as well, despises other people who want to also achieve greatness. So there's that sort of egoism and narcissism that's taking place at the same time. But critically as well, going back to that point, we have that moment of contemplation where he says, what do I actually want in this height? What exactly is good for me? What am I exactly waiting for? And then we get to find out what exactly is he waiting for. Of course, is his destruction, the lightning. And what does that exactly mean? Is that the destruction, of course, is a positive thing, because what it entails as, it's a thing that shows that the young man and his ideals are only a temporary thing, and what you hold as an ideal, what you hold as a value, what you've been aspiring towards, is only going to be held in a certain regard in a certain time period, and in another time what will be held to be aspiring towards will change and so forth. And actually achieving that goal, has it made him happy at all? And of course the answer is no. And so it's that moment of reflection upon one's own actions, realization that actually what you've been aspiring towards is actually incredibly destructive and harmful for you. And we get this in this next section as well. It breaks my heart. Better than your words, your eye tells me all your peril. You are not yet free, you still search for freedom. Your search has fatigued you and made you too wakeful. You long for the open heights, your soul thirsts for the stars, but your bad instincts too thirst for freedom. Your fierce dogs long for freedom. They bark for joy in their cellar when your spirit aspires to break open all prisons. To me, you are still a prisoner who imagines freedom. Ah, such prisoners of the soul become clever, but also deceitful and base. The free man of the spirit, too, must purify himself. Much of the prison and rottenness still remain within him. His eye still has to become pure. Yes, I know your peril, but by my love and hope, I entreat you, do not reject your love and hope. You still feel yourself noble, and others too, who dislike you and cast evil glances at you, still feel you are noble. Learn that everyone finds the noble man at obstruction. The good too find the noble man at obstruction, and even when they call him a good man, they do so in order to make away with him. The noble man wants to create new things, and a new virtue. The good man wants the old things, and that the old things shall be preserved. But that is not the danger for the noble man, that he may become a good man, but that he may become an impudent one, a derider, a destroyer. Alas, I have known noblemen who have lost their highest hope, and henceforth they slandered all high hopes. Henceforth they lived impudently in brief pleasures, and they had hardly an aim beyond the day. Spirit is also sensual pleasure, thus they spoke. Then the wings of their spirit broke. Now it creeps around it and makes it dirty, what it feeds on. Once they thought of becoming heroes, now they are sensualists. The hero is to keep them an affliction and a terror. But by my love and hope I entreat you, do not reject the hero in your soul. Keep holy your highest hope. Thus spoke Zarathustra. So we have that initial claim there. People have the danger of becoming a prisoner by the very rottenness of the ideal that they aspire towards. And that ideal in itself is like a corrupting force that destroys any semblance of what was good within a person in the first place. And then we have a distinction between the noble man and the good man, where the noble man wants newness and new values, whilst the good man wants to preserve what's already there, and so is incredibly conservative and is against the very idea of newness. And what's interesting as well, isn't it, that the danger for creating newness is not to just return back into the same values, but to just destroy all semblance of value and all semblance of meaning whatsoever. I think that's a really important point here, one that's sort of crucial into our modern society as well, or in contemporary society, in which we have this extreme criticism of things that can be going on. And you could say, well, and being skeptical and critical of something is a positive thing because you can show how it can change and there's problems within it. But Nietzsche is saying here, well, you can go one or two paths. You can try and return back into arguing for a previous way to think about things. You can go towards a new way of thinking about things. And if we go towards a new way of thinking about things, we can't just simply destroy all values that are there. What we need to do is take the value that we have and reevaluate it. The key concept there coming back up is reevaluation. And when we reevaluate it, we have to think of the problems that's inherent within the current way of thinking about it. Why is it a problem? What blockages does it put upon us? Why is that the case? How can it be more practical? How could it be more useful for us now? How can we make it function better? These are the sort of questions that we got to ask, and not to just completely just abolish the complete concept or value or structure altogether for Nietzsche. We don't want that at all. And that's what I think we have at the end there. Keep your highest hopes, in the sense of always have that aspiration for reevaluation, but never allow it to become that destructive, corruptive force. Otherwise we become prisoners again. So ultimately it's one way of saying as well, always keep that idea of wanting to change things, but always have it in a positive way where we want to affirm the structure and affirm the concepts that we have, but at the same time to reaffirm the very possibility we can change about how they think as well. And for this section, there's a great film example as well of Whiplash that came out in 2015. And here's a little synopsis from whatculture.com. Written and directed by young filmmaker Damien Chazelle, the film showcases the desperate lengths to which its protagonist is willing to go in order to impress its tyrannical instructor and cement himself as a true creative voice. Miles Teller plays Andrew, who has one of his drum practice sessions interrupted by J.K. Simmons' Fletcher. Fletcher invites Andrew into his prestigious jazz band and promptly shocks him with his aggressive methods for getting the best out of his band. Desperate to earn the approval of Fletcher, who is like Simon Cowell meets Hartman from Full Metal Jacket, Andrew repeatedly pushes himself to the brink of insanity in order to perfect his drumming ability. Whiplash is a damning portrait of how the desire for greatness and renown can destroy a young, raw talent. By the time Andrew performs his final masterpiece at the film's climax, he has cut ties with just about every human being in his life and has sacrificed every other aspect of his existence in order to be an excellent drummer. Andrew seems content at the climax of the film, having achieved his professional goals, but the desire for fame and success has eroded his humanity to the extent that all he can see is his drumstick. And I think that's a great little synopsis as well. And it's great to relate this section into the problems of fame precisely because it highlights that exact problem within the film of that achieving your goals ultimately alienates the individual completely and makes them asocial, and all what you have at the end is just solely this great one ability, in this case in order to play drums, but look at what exactly you've sacrificed, and look at all the amount of ties you've had to cut and friendships you've had to get rid of and relationships and so forth. Was it worth it in the end? And that's exactly what Nietzsche is also problematizing here. When you have that such a push for achieving that goal, it's also thinking about the harm of the alienation and what exactly mental health problems that you might entail from all this as well. Is it worth it? And then from Nietzsche's side of things, of course, it's not worth putting anybody through all that amount of mental strain, pressure, anxiety, stress, and so forth. Moving on to the next section then, of the preachers of death. There are preachers of death, and the earth is full of those to whom departure from life must be preached. The earth is full of the superfluous. Life is being corrupted by the many too many. Let them be lured by eternal life out of this life. Yellow men or black men, that is what preachers of death are called. But I want to show them to you in other colours. There are the dreadful creatures who carry a beast of prey around with them, and have no choice except lusts or self-mortification, and even their lusts are self-mortification. They have not yet even become men, these dreadful creatures. Let them preach departure from life, and depart themselves. There are the consumptives of the soul. They are hardly born before they begin to die, and to long for the doctrines of weariness and renunciation. They would like to be dead, and we should approve their wish. Let us guard against waking these dead men and damaging these living coffins. They encounter an invalid or an old man or a corpse, and straight away they say, life is refuted. But only they are refuted. They and their eye that sees only one aspect of existence. Muffled in deep depression and longing for the little accidents that bring about death, thus they wait and clench their teeth. Or they snatch its sweets, and in doing so mock their childishness. They cling to their straw of life and mock that they are still clinging to a straw. Their wisdom runs, he who goes on living is a fool. But we are such fools, and precisely that is the most foolish thing in life. So again, we have Nietzsche focusing on a criticism of organized religion and criticizing those who are arguing for an afterlife. Why is this the case? Because arguing for an afterlife focuses all our actions and thoughts away from the here and now and towards a future state. And what happens with this focus on this future state and the afterlife is that ultimately we renounce life itself in the here and now. And why is that the case? Why would you focus so much on the afterlife? Why is the here and now so bad? It's because the afterlife itself is presented like a carrot on a stick, kind of like encouraging someone to walk on a treadmill. You just hang it dangling out in front of them because it looks so good. It looks much better than the here and now, because what are you presented with here and now? You're presented with age, presented with death, suffering, miserable existence. What are you presented with in the afterlife? The complete opposite of that. No more suffering, no death, a complete happy existence. But Nietzsche shows the problem with this is really, well, do we end up with a happy existence in the here and now if we focus all our efforts on trying to achieve this afterlife? And of course the answer is no, because what we're actually doing is having this whole process of self-mortification, he says here, where we are ultimately just stuck in this rut of complete subjugation of our desires and are in self-denial. And what we see is a good thing, or what we uphold as a good thing, ultimately then leads into self-denial as well. And a good example in a religious context, of course, is fasting here, where fasting is upheld as a good thing for us to do. And of course, easy example of fasting as well is on Ash Wednesday, Good Friday, and all Fridays of Lent, where basically every person between the ages of 21 and 59 must fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And it says here on the nice part on Wikipedia that the Catholic Church teaches that all people are obliged by God to perform some penance for their sins, and that these acts of penance are both personal and corporeal. Bodily fasting is meaningless unless it is joined with a spiritual fast from sin. So ultimately, it's to fast is the reduction of one's intake of food, and abstinence refers from the refraining of eating meat. And that's seen as something that's both good for us in a physical sense as well as in the spiritual sense. But we see here Nietzsche's point as well, when you have something like fasting is upheld as something good, you're actually denying your just basic instinctual desire and need for food. Is that a negative thing? No. No, it's not something bad for us at all. It's something that we need to do in order to live. And our bodily desire is ultimately just telling us, hey, we need some food here. It'd be nice to get something to eat, because if we don't, well, we're just going to keep on telling you that you're hungry, because we need food in order to live. And so ultimately we have here portrayal as well, again we have a psychological profile of those who believe in the afterlife, the same as what goes on in the Despisers of the Body section, where from a mental health point of view as well, the belief in the afterlife ultimately leads people into this deep depression about life and almost becoming suicidal in a way as well, because they long for death, he says. And of course there's a great irony at work here, that those who are arguing for the afterlife, they themselves cease to live as well, he says. So they become ultimately like zombies in this zombie-like existence and never truly living themselves. You get that in the next little section as well that continues on. Life is only suffering. Thus others of them speak, and they do not lie. So see to it, you cease to live. So see to it that the life which is only suffering ceases. And let the teaching of your virtue be, you shall kill yourself. You shall steal away from yourself. Lust is sin. Thus say some who preach death. Let us go aside and beget no children. Giving children is laborious, say others. Why go on giving birth? One gives birth only to unhappy children, and they too are preachers of death. Men are to be pitied. Thus say others again. Take what I have, take what I am. By so much less am I bound to live. If they were compassionate for the very heart, they would seek to make their neighbours disgusted with life. To be evil, that would be their true good. But they want to escape from life. What is it to them that with their chains and gifts they bind others still more firmly to it? And to you too, you to whom life is unrestrained labour and anxiety, are you not weary of life? Are you not very ripe for the sermon of death? All of you to whom unrestrained labour and the swift, the new, the strange are dear, you endure yourselves ill, your industry is flight, and will to forget yourselves. If you believed more in life, you would devote yourselves less to the moment, but you have such insufficient capacity for waiting, or even for laziness. Everywhere resound the voices of those who preach death, and the earth is full of those to whom death must be preached, or eternal life. is all the same to me, provided they pass away quickly. Thus spoke Zarathustra. So again we have that relation into the body as well, and that quite humorous little section there about giving birth and lost is sin, beget no children. Why is that the case? Because one only gives birth to unhappy children. So there's that quite humorous wee section there of the continual sort of cycle of ultimately despising life and then giving birth to children who despise life, and so on and so on. And of course the deeper point to that again is just like the point with fasting, is that is our sexual desires and so forth, is our sexual needs always a negative thing? Of course it's not. It's again like eating, it's just a perfectly natural part of our bodily desires and drives. And in this given instance as well, what would happen if we completely adopted abstinence altogether? We'd have absolutely no human race whatsoever. And we also round the section off with quite a humorous little section as well. It's because ultimately they seek death and want eternal life. So it's fair enough, just hopefully they pass away more quickly, because they deny life, deny the world, deny their own bodies. So ultimately let's hope they just pass away quickly. And really it's a fun example here of Eric Idle's song Always Look on the Bright Side of Life from the movie The Life of Brian. That's a really great example to illustrate what Nietzsche is saying. So let's just briefly read over the little verses as well for Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. So it says, some things in life are bad. They can really make you mad. Other things just make you swear and curse. When you're chewing on life's gristle, don't grumble, give a whistle. And this'll help things turn out for the best. Then it goes into the chorus. If life seems jolly rotten and there's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and smile and dance and sing. When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the thing. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow. Forget about your sin. Give the audience a grin. Enjoy it. It's your last chance anyhow. So you've got also that lovely point about even when life's really getting you down, even when things are really depressing, also there's a lot of enjoyment to life. There's a lot of things that make us laugh, smile, dance, sing. Is it really all that miserable? I think it's a great wee way to end off our wee discussion for this week. So many thanks for listening to the episode. Feel free to give me a wee email at my address, dissectingphilosophy@gmail.com. Also can be found on Twitter at IamARubberman. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you join us next time.